Today's show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy. Over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
You're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show with Captain Jeff.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode number 97.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff. Roger. LA, good morning. 123.9.
Roger. Being less connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 2 in the APG West Coast Headquarters building. In this episode, my thoughts and opinions about the NTSB Asiana 214 hearing this past week, a man arrested for a planned attack at the Wichita Mid-Continent Airport. Let's see, new FAA sleep apnea policy. More news and feedback, including Fume events, lost comm, and more. So, get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 97 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. Again, I'm Captain Jeff, broadcasting live from beautiful Southern California. Actually, a little bit of a marine layer or overcast layer right now, but the weather here is just beautiful here in Southern California. And many of you know that Southern California is where I grew up. In fact, I grew up most of my, from about 2 through about, or maybe 4 through about 13 years old. We lived here in Los Alamitos, California, and that's where I am right now, just off of Catella Boulevard. For many of you familiar with Southern California have heard of Catella. In fact, I believe Disneyland, some of the Disney properties are located further to the, I always get messed up here, I'm about 90 degrees off, so because I grew up on the West Coast, and I thought going to the beach was west, but actually here along this coastline, from my house to get to the beach, you go almost due south. So in my head, everything is 90 degrees off, which is kind of weird. So if you head out, to me, it seems like it would be to the east, but I guess it's north to go off Catella. I don't know. I'm all confused. Maybe it is to the east. Anyway, that's where you go to Anaheim, California, and Disneyland. And when I was 13 years old, many of you know this story, but I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis. We moved from here in the Southern California area out to Mobile, Alabama. And that's where I spent my junior high and high school years and had a great time in Mobile. A lot of great memories, a lot of great friends that we made in Mobile. But I'm here to visit my mom. My mom and my sister still live out here in Southern California, and this is as I mentioned, my sister's house. And if you're watching the video, you can see the scene behind me. That's the deck area around the swimming pool. I mean, if you live in Southern California, you have to have a swimming pool, right? You know, like old Jed the Millionaire, Kim Folk said, Jed, move away from there. California is a place you ought to be. So he loaded up the truck and he moved to Beverly Hill, swimming pools, movie stars, and all that kind of stuff. So Long Beach is we're in the very northern portion of Orange County, just a couple miles shy of the Los Angeles County border. And just to the, not far from here, is Long Beach, California. And Long Beach, ironically, is where the airplane that I fly right now, the MD-88, MD-90 series, was actually built. And sometimes people refer to, in a derogatory manner, the Mad Dog as the Long Beach sewer pipe. Now, I don't think that's fair, but I, too, was born in Long Beach at St. Mary's Hospital back in the latter part of 1958. Yeah, do the math. I'll be 55 years old next week. And I was born the day after Christmas, December 26th of 1958, and I was born at St. Mary's Hospital. Probably giving too much information. Now all you need is my Social Security number, and you can steal my identity. Uh-oh, maybe I should edit this out. Anyway, a lot of memories here. This is where I grew up and learned or acquired my passion and love of flying. And going to the local airports, heading up to Los Angeles International Airport, dropping off and picking up family, going on trips. I remember I was on one of the early 707 demonstration flights. Well, maybe it wasn't a demonstration flight because that thing came out in the late 50s, right? But I do remember I was a young child when we went up on a 707, and they just went flying around the Southern California area and then landed, maybe an hour-long flight, if that. But I fell in love with the smell of the jet fuel, the burnt jet fuel. Many of you know what I'm talking about. It's a wonderful scent, I think. Maybe that we should somehow capture that scent and make it into a men's cologne. Nah, probably just the men would like the smell of burnt jet fuel. But I love the whole idea of traveling and the cosmopolitan lifestyle of an airline pilot. And it was that back then. Not so much now, but it's still a great job, and I love doing it. And that's why I do this podcast, to kind of share my love of podcasting and my love of aviation with you with this podcast. Sorry, getting a little confused with my words. And the reason why I feel like I'm rushing right now is because I have a very short window of opportunity here. In fact, any moment now, that door is going to open. My sister's dog, Tilly, is going to start barking, and the whole gig is going to be up. I'm going to have to finish the podcast at a later time. So I'm hoping that we'll get most of this recorded, or some of it recorded, before that happens. So what else was I going to say? Well, next week I mentioned my birthday, and of course, most importantly, we commemorate the birth of Jesus Christ on Christmas Day, the 25th of December, and that is next week. And I think what I'm going to do, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to take, and I don't think you will, because most of you are going to be visiting family and you're going to be busy with other things, and you certainly don't need a 2-hour podcast to listen to. So I'm going to take the week off in honor of Christmas and my birthday. So that may change, but I think that I'm going to stick with that. Give me a little time to spend with my family and enjoy the Christmas holidays. So don't expect a show next week. So that was what I was going to say about that. Let's see, my coffee fun. Let me get over here. Many of you are going, "Oh, Jeff, you're just so unorganized. Why do you have to take so much time?" Oh, you know what? I think I hear the garage door, so I didn't get very much recorded at all. But let me just start with the Java Jive here. The Coffee Fund, music, and let me tell you about those who contributed this past week. Michael, Natalie, Philip, and James. Thank you very much for your kind contributions. And I believe that I'm going to flip the switch pretty soon on the funding site called, I think I talked about it on the last episode, Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/airlinepilotguy. And you'll still have the opportunity to contribute the way that many of you are right now through PayPal by clicking my Buy Me a Cup of Coffee button. But you might want to check out the Patreon site. That's something that I'm going to be experimenting with to see if it works out. If you guys like this kind of idea about contributing a certain amount per episode and then certain benefits involved with your level of contribution. All right, so here they are. They're coming in. Hey, Eric. Hi, Karen. Uh-oh. Yeah. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go ahead and put this thing on pause, and we'll be back as soon as possible to continue with this week's news and, of course, the most important part of your show, or my show. Well, it's all our show, your feedback. So I'll be right back. Here, let me click on the music and have them fade off gently into the background. And here we go. Oh, that wasn't gently at all. I need to fix that. Okay. Well, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and put this thing on pause, and I'll be right back. Okay, well, I am back. Not in the same beautiful surroundings that I was in previously, just a few minutes ago, over, at the beginning of this recording. Things just didn't work out. My sister came in with her boyfriend, and things just didn't get quiet enough for me to finish the episode in Southern California that day. I think that was Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. It's now, fast forward, it's Friday night actually, about 11 o'clock at night, and hoping to get a little bit of recording accomplished here before my oldest daughter takes her shower upstairs, and then it's going to get noisy again. I'm probably going to have to stop. But I'll see how much I can get finished here. So I had a great visit in California with my sister and my mother, and I left Thursday morning, at a pretty early flight, about a 7:45 departure, and I was the last person to get on the airplane, and I think that was pretty close to the top of the non-revenue priority list, and I had to use my higher priority just to get on, stay toward the top of that list. And the seats just disappeared. Not a good time to travel on the airlines if you don't have a paying passenger ticket. So, but I took the last seat and made it home yesterday. Got into Atlanta about 3:30 or so in the afternoon, and then after riding the train and the bus and the van back home, I finally walked in the door here around 5 o'clock, maybe a little bit after that. So a long day of traveling, and watched a great movie last night. My oldest daughter and my son said they wanted to go see Saving Mr. Banks, and I wanted to see it as well, and it didn't start until about 10 o'clock last night. I was still on California time, so it wasn't that big of a deal for me. Got home around 12:30 or so, and caught up with some email and some other things, and finally got to bed about 2 o'clock last night. So trying to acclimate back to, and it's only 3 hours time difference between California and Georgia. But anyway, I'm excited to be home and get ready for the Christmas holidays here, finish decorating the tree and other things around the house. And that is about it. You're all caught up. So I believe I was just about to start talking a little bit about the news on the last recording. So here we go. Let's go ahead and hit our news stinger. All right. Last week, specifically on Wednesday of last week, the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, had their investigative hearing in Washington, D.C. And it was supposed to be a two-day hearing, Tuesday and Wednesday, but because of inclement weather, snow and icing conditions up in the D.C. area, they decided to try to cram it all into one day. And they started about 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning on Wednesday, and they went up until about 8 o'clock that night. So approximately 12 hours of various panels and questioning and that kind of thing. I caught most of it. I didn't get all of it. In the middle of the day, I had to run out and do some errands. But from what I did watch, let me tell you what my takeaway was regarding the as far as the rounds of questions and just my impression of what they've gathered so far and where this thing is heading. I think probably the best way to sum the whole thing up would be assumptions. And what I mean by that is, and I heard that quite a few times in the questioning, especially during that first panel when the investigators were asking the folks from Boeing in Korea who were contracted to do the full motion simulator training for the Asiana pilots. And what do I mean by assumptions? Well, I think that here, let me read my notes here just so that I don't forget anything. There was an assumption about the level of knowledge and level of confidence in pilot flying skills. The pilot in command did not have a thorough understanding of how the autothrottle system behaves in all of its modes. Assumptions were made by the Boeing simulator training instructors that Asiana pilots have received and understand how the different modes of autothrottle systems operate. Instruction via ground school, manuals, literature, computer-based training is possibly inadequate. And the assumption that pilots going through this kind of transition program, which is what the Boeing folks were doing in the simulator, they were transitioning pilots from one type of airplane to another. And when you're moving from one airplane to another, especially moving to the Boeing 777, that's usually a move up. And that's usually for somebody who has had many years of experience and many thousands of hours of flying time. And so, the assumption, again, is that someone who has that many hours of flying and that many years of flying, and I think most of these pilots also had military backgrounds as well, that they would understand and know how to fly a visual approach. And of course, the various autothrottle system modes, it was assumed by everybody that the ground training courses would cover the various modes of the autothrottle systems and what the implications were when using various modes of the autothrottles. And again, those assumptions proved to be not accurate. They should not have assumed that everybody understood how the autothrottle system worked on the Boeing 777. Let's see, I think I have a quote here from, oh, by the way, I'll put a link in the show notes to this, a PDF document issued by the National Transportation Safety Board that has the transcript of the questioning of the crew, the captain who was in training, the sitting in the left seat and at the controls, pilot flying at the time of the crash, the gentleman sitting in the right seat who was the instructor pilot, and this is his first time instructing, and he was technically the pilot in command of the flight, and then the first officer who was sitting in the jump seat, and the other captain who was sitting in the back cabin. He was not in the cockpit at the time of the accident, which was okay. It's part of their policies, and he was not required to be in the cockpit at the time, at least from what I can gather. And so from that document, I gleaned some quotes. Lee, the captain flying, was asked whether he found the accident approach easy or difficult or in the middle. He said it was very stressful, very difficult to perform a visual approach with a heavy airplane, always. From the planning phase, it was very stressful because the glide slope was very, very helpful to making an approach. He knew the NOTAMs, notices to airmen, said it was out of service, but everyone else had been doing the visual approach, so he could not say he could not do the visual approach. That had been a very stressful factor. Asked whether he was concerned about his ability to perform the visual approach, he said, very concerned, yeah. Asked what aspect he was most concerned about, he said, the unstable approach. He added, exactly controlling the descent profile and the lateral profile. That is very stressful. Okay, so we have a situation here where I've gathered, based on the questioning, that Asiana is one of many, many airlines out there who have a policy to use automation to its fullest at all times possible. And this is not just this particular Asian carrier. There are carriers here in the domestic United States whose policy, written policy, is that you will use the automation, the autothrottle systems, everything to the greatest extent possible. Now, thankfully, at my airline, that is not the case. We are taught to use the automation. It's a tool. and we are encouraged to do so. But as pilots, we are allowed to make our judgment as far as how much of the automation we use, what modes of automation we use, etc. So at my airline, it's not a policy that we use automation to the greatest extent possible. But I can guarantee you there are airlines in our country here in the United States and around the world who not only greatly encourage the use of the auto-flight systems, but basically mandate it. And I don't think that's smart. I don't think that's safe. And I think that we're finding that out, finally, after many lives have been lost. So let me go on. The other thing that I took away was the aspect of culture and authority. And we had, early on, many people had commented that there are certain countries and certain societies around the world that have certain ways of dealing with authority, and the culture is a big part of it. And let me read my notes here. Culture played a large role in reluctance to exercise authority of the captain pilot flying. That despite the fact that the approach was unstable, especially during the final stage, no one called for a go-around until it was far too late. I believe they called for the go-around at 20 feet above touchdown. And here's a quote again from the transcript of the interviews with the pilots of the Asiana flight. Normally only in our Korean culture, the one step higher level, the final decision people, he did decide the go-around thing. It's a very important thing. As a first officer or the low-level people, they dare to think about the go-around thing. It's very hard. Question of the investigator. In your mind then, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you tell me, did you feel as the pilot in the left seat flying the airplane that you had the authority to commence a go-around yourself? And Captain Lee Kang-kook's answer is, go-around thing. That is a very important thing. But the instructor pilot got the authority. Even I am on the left seat in the command pilot's position. That is very hard to explain. That is our culture. Okay, so obviously the right to call a go-around is the right of any crew member that sees something that is unsafe. And I think that it could be accurately said that the instructor pilot, knowing that this man in the left seat flying the airplane didn't have a lot of experience on the 777, only about 45 hours. It was one of his his training trips, his what do we call it? Initial operating experience on the 777. He should have been aware of, or he was aware of that. He should have realized that at the point at which the approach was getting unstable and unsafe, that it was his responsibility to call for the go-around. And apparently that's what Captain Cook was waiting for, to hear somebody say go-around. But he never heard anybody say it, and of course until it was way too late. But as a captain with over 10,000 hours of flying time, Captain Cook should have made the decision himself. He was flying the airplane. If he wasn't comfortable with the situation, he should have commenced a go-around on his own. Interestingly, we talk about ways to judge your descent profile on visual approaches when you don't have any electronic guidance. And you've heard me say this before several times, the 3-to-1 rule for every, for every mile distance from the end of the runway, you multiply by 3, and that should be your altitude. So at 1 mile out, you should be 300 feet, 2 miles out, 600 feet, 3 miles out, 900 feet, etc. Approximately. That's a 3-to-1 glide path to the touchdown point. And in reading, and I haven't finished reading all these transcripts yet, but the first officer, the one who had the least amount of experience and was the youngest of all 3 pilot crew members in the cockpit during the crash. He mentioned in his interview that he was sitting there doing the mental calculations himself, and initially they were high, and that was kind of the setup of this whole thing. When they were coming in, he was multiplying the mileage from the end of the runway times 3, and he said that he came up with a figure like 2,100 feet, and I think at that time they were 2,400 or 2,500 feet. And so he knew that they were about 300 or 400 feet high, but he didn't say anything. And obviously the two pilots in the control seats knew they were a little bit high because they were increasing. They went to vertical speed mode, increased the descent from I think 1,000 feet per minute to 1,500 feet per minute. That's the point at which, and the throttles were back at idle, and they remained there until way too long, as we know. But they were trying to correct for a little bit too high on the glide path, and so they went through the normal glide path and then went way below it, and then assuming, again the word assuming, that the auto throttle system would keep them safe and keep the minimum speed. At that point they set in 137 knots for the reference speed, but the throttle stayed back at idle, and the airspeed continued to bleed off, and we know what the result was. So again, maybe I'm not being very clear or eloquent with what I'm trying to say here, but my takeaway from that day of hearings and questioning is that there were a lot of assumptions made, and assumptions that should not have been made. Now, the good news is that I think that a lot of people are going to take away or learn a lot of lessons from this. Obviously, they're going to do something to ensure that training at Asiana on the 777 includes very thorough discussions and implications, and I'm sure it's going to be included in the simulator sessions as well, of the various modes of the auto throttle system and what it will do and what it won't do. Another part that I kind of picked up on, I'm not sure that if I completely understand the 777 auto throttle system, but apparently there's some kind of a mode, and also in the 787 as well, that called a wake-up mode that should, even if you're in the flight change mode or a vertical speed, whatever mode it's in, it's supposed to wake up the throttles and bring the power in. And apparently that didn't happen. So I may be misunderstanding the line of questioning there and the answers, but I'm sure we're going to hear something about that. I'm sure that the policy of the Boeing instructors in Korea, contracted out to carriers around the world, are going to ensure that instructor pilots don't assume that just because somebody is upgrading to a big wide-body airplane like the 777 that they understand everything, and that they're not necessarily going to be comfortable with flying visual approaches. Now, visual approaches, it's kind of hard to simulate a visual approach in a simulator, even a full motion simulator. I mean, we do them, but the best place to learn how to do visual approaches is actually in the airplane. And we need to practice doing them. So if you're listening to me and you're a pilot who flies an airplane that relies upon a lot of automation, you should. And if you're going into a place that's not one of the places like Atlanta or Chicago or New York where everything is very, very regimented, but going into maybe one of the smaller destinations where you're kind of on your own, and the weather is VFR or VMC, visual meteorological conditions, this might be a time to practice those visual approach skills, and hand flying, just to keep that skill honed as best as you can. All right, I spent more time on this than I wanted to, so that is my takeaway so far of the Asiana 214 and the investigation so far. And I said so far way too many times so far. Okay. Don't know if you heard about this. This is kind of odd. For months, authorities allege a 58-year-old avionics technician named Terry Lee Lowen, driven by radical ideas and prepared to die in a suicide attack, moved forward with a plot to detonate explosives at Wichita Mid-Continent Airport. The planned attack was designed to inflict the maximum number of deaths at an airport at the nation's midsection before Christmas, says a detailed criminal complaint filed on Friday. The plot got as far as a gate to the airport shortly before 6 a.m. Friday, and this was it a week ago Friday or maybe a couple weeks ago now, when authorities arrested Lowen without incident. What he didn't know until his arrest is that the people he had been conspiring with all along were FBI agents, U.S. Attorney Barry Grissom announced Friday, stressing that the public and passengers were never in danger. So we have this guy who is kind of sympathizing with Al-Qaeda and wants to engage in his own jihad, and pretty much on his own. I think that nobody really has connected him in an organized effort to do some kind of a terrorist act at the Mid-Continent airport in Wichita. So, but that's just reminding us that there are people out there that have kind of kooky ideas and want to hurt people, and we always have to keep our guard up. So good job on the FBI agents for arresting this guy, and before it got to the point where we had a lot of people injured or killed. All right. No, that's not me. That's not me snoring. Although that probably does sound like me at night when I'm sleeping, but that's beside the point. You may have heard about this a few weeks ago, after several highly publicized incidents involving sleeping or fatigued pilots and air traffic controllers. The FAA announced they were going to put new scrutiny on the problem, requiring all overweight pilots and controllers to undergo testing for sleep disorders. The order, announced by the FAA's Federal Air Surgeon, is massive in scope and could apply to about 125,000 of the nation's 600,000 commercial and private pilots, according to one estimate, and an unknown number of the nation's 14,500 controllers. Under this new policy, all pilots and controllers will be screened during their routine medical examinations. Those with a body mass index, a BMI, of 40 or greater and a neck circumference of 17 inches would have to be tested for obstructive sleep apnea. A BMI of 40 equates to a 5'11" man weighing 287 pounds, according to the National Institutes of Health. And sleep apnea, which can cause fatigue, is almost universal in people who fit those criteria, says Dr. Fred Tilton, the Federal Air Surgeon. So word got out that the FAA was going to implement this rule without any discussion about it, without any other parties, interested parties, participating in the discussion about whether this should become a new rule. And ALPA and AOPA, among many groups that said, hey, wait, time out. You can't just, make this new rule up and go forward without consulting with the people that it's going to affect. And basically on the 12th of December, Dr. Frederick Tilton said, well, you know what? I don't need to, and I'm going forward with it. He's going to fast track the sleep apnea policy. And I was just about to end in fact, if I had recorded this on Tuesday, I would have said that's where it stands right now. This rule is going to go into effect. And at the time, the House of Congress, a bipartisan bill, House of Representatives 3578, introduced last month by House Aviation Subcommittee Chairman Frank LoBiondo, would compel the FAA to follow established rulemaking processes and allow time for industry stakeholders to provide input. But again, as I said, the Federal Air Surgeon said, "Well, I'm going forward with this. I know you Don't want me to, but I'm going to. And I thought, I don't know what happened to it. I guess I didn't sync up my my Evernote account here, but I'll just do it on the fly. I just noticed, I was checking my email before I started the recording tonight, and I believe it was on flightaware.com. I have several different sources that I use for gathering news for the show. And they said it looks like the FAA has decided to kind of hit the pause button on this whole thing and allow time for interested and interesting industry groups to kind of be a part of this whole process. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to say, you know what, yeah, you're right. We're going to get rid of this sleep apnea, this new policy. But at least this will give time for the Airline Pilots Association, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, et cetera, to take a look at what's going to be required with this new rule, and kind of have some give and take here. So we'll keep our eyes open and ears open on this one to see if this goes forward. Now, I went from a 15.5-inch neckline to a 16-inch neckline because I'm gaining a little weight. Now, my body mass index is not 40 or higher, but I can tell you it's not where it should be for somebody my height. So I'm not in the normal BMI range. I am in the overweight range, and it is my goal to lose some of this weight. I think you've heard me say that before, but I'm really going to make a concerted effort to do it because I don't want to be one of those people that has to go and get one of those sleep studies and then end up having to whatever. I don't want to be grounded for sleep apnea. So we'll see what happens there. Okay. This was interesting and promising, I thought. Southwest Airlines announced last Thursday it's introducing a new weather detection system. It's called the Water Vapor Sensing Systems. It's installing it on 87 of its Boeing 737s, which will provide real-time humidity data for planes in flight and during takeoff and landing. The WVSS-2 works by measuring water vapor in the atmosphere hundreds of times throughout a flight and transmitting the data to the U.S. National Weather Service. Using this data, forecasters can create computer-generated scenarios to detect severe weather conditions. Let's see. The data can also be used to determine the location and timing of fog, cloud formation, and dissipation, as well as altitudes of cloud ceilings. Knowing all of these factors plays a key role in determining safe flying conditions. And this system, the Water Vapor Sensing System, is the product of a partnership between the Aeronautical Radio Incorporated, ARINC, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA, and Spectra Sensors. So if you want to read more about that from the frequentbusinesstraveler.com, I'll have that link in the show notes. So that's good. I'm always for using technology to help us with forecasting weather conditions. Oh boy. Well, you may have seen this, heard about this just a few days ago. A Delta Airlines Boeing 737-800 was performing Flight 385 from Minneapolis to Madison, Wisconsin, with 60 passengers and 6 crew. They landed on Madison's runway 18 at 3:58 local time, 21:58 Zulu. During the rollout, the crew reported the braking action good and was instructed to vacate the runway via taxiway Alpha 6 to Alpha and to report when clear of the runway. Let's see, the weather conditions at the time were calm winds, 1/4 statute mile visibility. They were calling RVRs anywhere from 2,400 to 3,000 feet, and they were anywhere from heavy snow to normal snowfall amounts or rates. Freezing fog, temperature minus 11, minus 12 degrees Celsius. Okay, so a typical wintry day in Madison, Wisconsin. obviously flying instrument approaches. And they have 3 runways there in Madison, but the one that they were using, runway 18, is the longest. It's 9,006 feet long. And the other 2 are shorter, and apparently they don't have instrument landing systems that go down to these kind of minimums. And I have a recording from liveatc.net, and let's take a listen to what transpired here at Madison.
Delta 385, turn right at Alpha 6 and a right turn on ALPA. Report went off the runway, traffic on a 4-mile final.
Okay, that was the radio call from the tower after the flight had touched down and was in its landing roll. I don't know at what point of the roll it was, if it was, considerably down the runway or whatever, but that was the instruction to, again, let's replay that so we can hear it again.
Delta 385, turn right at Alpha 6 and a right turn on ALPA. Report went off the runway, traffic on a 4-mile final.
At Alpha 6, right again, we'll let you know we're off Delta 385.
And Delta 385, can I get a braking action report?
He asked for a braking action report.
Braking action, good.
Roger.
So
AC 4171, traffic just arrived, Boeing 737, report braking action, good.
Okay, that guy's 2 flights out. There's one that's closer in, and then the one that he just talked to that was a little bit further out. So we have a couple more airplanes coming in on approach.
0.3, have a good day.
19-3, you do the same, 86184, see you.
Okay, that was, I think, the one that had landed before the Delta flight.
See ya.
New tower, AC 6184, ILS 18.
AC 6184, Madison Tower, traffic on 2-mile final, runway 18, clear to land, 1180 at 3, RVR, 2,800 touchdown, 2,200 rollout.
Okay, 2,800 RVR for the touchdown, and above, I think he said 3,200 for the rollout. That means that, visibility is limited, and the RVR reading is 2,800 feet. And so here we have the situation where the 737 has landed. It's getting normal deceleration because he's saying braking action is good. They reported that. Tower instructs the Delta flight to turn right at Alpha 6, which happens to be the last taxiway, a 90-degree turn, not a high-speed taxiway, at the very end of runway 18, and then Alpha, which is the parallel taxiway, to taxi northbound toward the terminal area. And so, again, just to kind of reiterate, we have the 737 that has just landed, and we have 2 other regional jets on final.
Okay, clear to land 18, AC 6184, thanks.
AC 6184, traffic, braking action reported good by Boeing 737 1 minute ago.
Thank you.
Delta 385, are you off the runway?
Delta 385, I think you're going to have to send the trucks out.
AC 4171, go around, fly runway heading, climb, maintain 3,000.
Up to 3,000 runway, AC 4171.
Okay, you hear the urgency there from the tower controller, but it was a great call because the tower obviously can't see the runway because of the visibility, and that's why he asked if the Delta flight was off the runway. And when he said, he didn't really say, no, we're not off the runway. He said, I think you need to send the trucks. And so the tower controller very astutely interpreted that as something has gone wrong and something may be blocking the runway at some point. And so I have an airplane that is just about to touch down. I better instruct that airplane to go around. And let's continue with the recording.
Delta 385, are you still on the runway?
Delta 385 requires assistance.
Delta 385, roger. And say nature of emergency?
We could not stop on the end of the runway there by Alpha 6, and we have exited the prepared surface just at the end of the runway off to the right towards Alpha 6.
AC 6184, correction, AC 6184, go around, fly runway heading, climb, maintain 3,000.
Going around, runway heading 3,000, AC 6184.
Okay, so that's the second one that was on final approach. They were instructed to go around as well. So tower is doing a great job to keep everything's safe and instructing the two airplanes following the 737 to go around.
And Delta 385, just to verify, you're off the runway on the departure ends, just so we know?
I would appear that we are all the way off the runway into the snow-covered tundra.
Okay, roger, Delta 385. We're going to get some help out there for you. We'll let the ground controller know. Thank you.
Okay, so as far as the flight is concerned, the 737 flight, they are off the prepared surface and in the snow-covered tundra. And so they're not really declaring an emergency, but they're going to need assistance to get the airplane out of its predicament and also to do something with the passengers.
You want 4171 at departure.
4171 for now, just remain this frequency, climb and maintain 4,000. Turn left heading 140.
4,000 heading 140, see 4171.
Delta 385, you want to send out emergency vehicles for you?
AC 4171, contact departure 120.1.
There's a discussion.
I think we needed the emergency vehicles, sir, but we're going to need some assistance getting out of where we're at, as well as assistance with passengers.
Okay, very good. We'll talk to ground and see what the best thing is here to do.
Roger.
Departure AC 4171, level 4.
AC 4171, master departure, radar contact, turn fan 090. It's going to be a long vector for the final. They've got the runway closed at the moment, and I'll keep you advised.
090 for now. We'll just stay at 200 knots. Is that fine?
And departure AC 6184, 3000, runway heading.
AC 6184, Madison departure, radar contact, maintain 3000, expect vectors Alice 18 final approach course. They did have an aircraft go off the runway, so it might be a little bit longer vector to get that aircraft taken care of.
All right, we don't have much time. We may have to go to the alternate.
And AC 6184, what's your alternate?
Good question.
And you want to do that now or wait for a few minutes?
Well, if it's only a few minutes, but we're probably going to need to go in just a few minutes.
AC 6184, okay, we'll get a flight plan put in for you, and I'll give you advice. You're going to remain on 180 heading for now.
180 heading, AC 6184.
Okay, that's enough. Not really sure exactly what happened there. The initial report by the 737 crew was that the braking action was good. One theory that comes to my mind is that the call was, right turn at the end, Alpha 6, well, they didn't say at the end, right turn on Alpha 6 to Alpha, report clearing traffic on a 4-mile final. Okay, usually when you hear something like that as a pilot, you want to, it's kind of you feel like there's maybe a sense of urgency that you get off the airplane, or the runway as soon as possible so that the flight that's right behind you about to land can land safely. So it's possible that they may have expedited their speed down the runway, assuming that the good braking action would continue all the way to the end. And then when they actually had to slow down, decelerate, make the right turn onto Alpha 6, they just didn't have the friction, the traction to make the turn, and they went sliding off the runway. That's a possibility. I really don't know that much about this except for what I've read on the Aviation Herald and what I've heard on this recording. Another possibility is that, and many of us know this, that just because the friction, the braking friction is good at some point on the runway and during your landing rollout, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good when you make your transition from the runway to a taxiway, and especially at the very ends of the runways. A lot of times there's a lot of rubber tire buildup, and that can decrease the amount of frictional coefficient. And it could be that maybe the runway wasn't treated very well right in that area. Obviously, when you have winter conditions and you have snow and ice and really low temperatures, they do their best to treat the runway surfaces, but they don't always do a great job everywhere. And so it may have just caught this crew off guard when they were experiencing good braking coefficients, and then all of a sudden they were like a skater on an ice skating rink. They had no traction at all, and they just went sliding off. So the good thing here is that it doesn't seem that the airplane was damaged. I'm not sure about that, but apparently no injuries to passengers or anything else. So we'll have to wait and see what happened in this particular instance. But thought it'd be interesting to go through that sequence of events. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say, and this is especially important for me and for everybody listening out there who is an airline pilot, and really anybody who's a pilot, especially an instrument-rated pilot. We carry when the weather is a certain level in instrument meteorological conditions, we require to carry fuel to make an approach, and then do a missed approach, and then proceed to our alternate, and it also involves some holding fuel as well. And it looked like it was going to be a pretty straightforward approach for these two flights that were coming in behind the incident airplane. And then all of a sudden, at the very last minute, they were told to go around. And let me tell you what, it's a big pucker factor there, especially when you're doing a very low visibility approach. And then all of a sudden, they tell you to go around. And then, of course, you have the matter of trying to figure out, okay, how much fuel do we have? How long can we wait around here and determine whether or not the runway is going to open anytime soon? And at what point do we need to say we're going to need to go to our alternate? So you heard a little bit of that kind of discussion going on there with one of the aircraft in the air behind the incident aircraft. And I'm pretty sure that both of those flights ended up having to divert to their alternate because I don't think they got the runway cleared right away. So it's always something to think about, even in good weather. Anything can happen. An airplane in front of you can have some kind of an incident or accident on the runway, and if it's only one runway, you better have a plan in your head that if something goes wrong or I can't land at this airport, I better have a plan in my hip pocket of where I'm going to go. Probably not so much a factor when you're going into big airports that have 4, 5, 6 or more runways. But if you're going into a place that only has 1 or 2 runways, it's always a good idea to have some kind of a plan, even when the weather is beautiful. So in this case, it was not, and they had the fuel reserves on there for going to an alternate and doing some holding and that kind of thing. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting one. And you may have heard the latest about the Federal Communications, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has been looking at and is considering allowing the use of cell phones on airplanes. In other words, cell phones with the cellular antenna on, which would allow for folks to use their phones for voice communications and digital data transmissions. A lot of people have very strong views about this. I personally think that having the ability to use your cell phone as far as a voice communication is probably not a good idea. We've all experienced it. We've been in a public place when people are just yelling into their phone, and I don't want to be sitting next to someone and listening to their conversation on the telephone. If they do allow for voice communications, they're going to have to do something to the actual infrastructure of the cellular antenna system on the ground, because as it stands right now, it's not really designed to handle this kind of thing. I don't know if you've noticed you accidentally left your telephone on the airplane, or maybe you actually even tried to use it to send a text message or whatever. You've probably experienced the situation where above a certain altitude, above maybe 5,000 feet or so, that even if you have that little symbol in your smartphone that you have a cellular signal, chances are it's not going to work because you are traveling at a high rate of speed. At the cellular antennas, these towers on the ground were not designed for somebody traveling so quickly. You know what happens with the cellular system when you're in your car and you're driving around and you're talking on your phone, unbeknownst to you, the cellular tower that you're using knows when you're getting close to being out of its range, and it knows that there's another one or another couple of them closer to where you are now, and it just automatically transfers the transmission to the next tower. And it can do that because you're not traveling that fast. But if you're in an airplane traveling at a much higher rate, it's much more difficult for the cellular antennas to do that, the towers to handle that kind of a transaction. So I guess it's technically possible. The cell companies would have to do something to upgrade their system to allow for that. The digital data transfer, the text messages, not such a big deal because those are very, very small, very, very little tiny bits of information that have to be passed, and it can happen very, very quickly, so it's not so critical with digital data transmission and reception. The CEO of Delta Airlines, Richard Anderson, announced just a few days ago that Delta Airlines would continue its ban of in-air calls, even if the FCC and the FAA approves it. So I think they've done some surveys at Delta Airlines, and their passengers have said that we don't want that. That's not something that we would like to see if we fly on Delta Airlines. So there's one CEO that already has taken a stand. So we'll see where this goes, if it's something that it happens or not. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a good idea to have voice communications via cell phone available on your flight? Yeah, let me know. Okay, this is an interesting one. Apparently, a Pakistani airline, Pakistan International Airlines (PIA) pilot delayed a flight leaving Lahore Airport. I think they were heading to New York via Manchester on December 15th. And the pilot, I'm assuming the captain, learned that there were no sandwiches on the menu, only peanuts, chips, and biscuits, according to the paper. He said he needed sandwiches at any cost. The pilot's request was sent to the catering office and then to the airline's management office in Karachi. The management directed the catering department to meet his demand. According to the paper, the flight finally departed at 9:15 a.m., a 2.5-hour delay. Airline spokesman Mashood Tajwar told the Nation newspaper that management had taken a serious notice of the delay of an international flight. He said an investigation has been ordered and action would be taken against those responsible for it. So I think this particular pilot is going to be in a bit of trouble for delaying the flight for his sandwich. And, you may remember a few episodes ago, there was a Thai Airways International Airbus, a 330, I believe, that upon landing at the Suvarnabhumi Airport, I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly where that was, they were landing, and at some point during the landing roll, the airplane veered off the runway and came to a stop off of the runway. And it turns out that during the investigation, they found a crack in the right bogie beam of the Airbus, which caused the landing mishap. And let me tell you, it's so nice to see an incident where it's not pilot error, that it was something, I mean, not that it's good to have a mechanical error on an airplane, but it's good in this case that it was not a pilot or human error. It was a structural or mechanical problem. All right, let me look through here and make sure I've covered all of the news items that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I think that's it. So you know what that means. It's time for the best part of the show, your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Okay, let's start off. Let me do this first here. Let me resort my feedback just so that I hit the feedback that I received the longest ago. I'm sure that wasn't proper English there, but you get what I'm trying to say. Dave from Toronto writes, let's imagine that you're flying to Chicago and about a half an hour before landing, all of your radios have died. You can't communicate with anyone on the ground. All other mechanisms of sending messages around the world, telephone, telegraph, and telewoman, have also failed. As Carl Malden would ask, what would you do? What would you do? Thanks. And again, that's from Dave from Toronto. Okay, so we have something called lost communication procedures. And reading from the Airway Manual, it says this section should be used as a worldwide standard for lost communications. Information provided is the U.S. standard with International Civil Aviation Organization differences. And, of course, it refers us to other parts of the Airway Manual for different countries that are the exception to this rule. So when you're operating to a place on an international flight, you want to look through whatever country you're going to be flying in to see what their rules are when it comes to losing communications and what you do. Okay, so first of all, you're just speaking personally. If I'm having trouble communicating on a radio, of course we're going to try the other radio, and we're going to try different frequencies. We're going to make every effort to reestablish communications, including talking with other airplanes that are on the frequency. Maybe you're just having trouble communicating with the ground control facility, but you can communicate with other airplanes. Again, let's assume that we cannot communicate at all. So, hey, if the FCC authorizes it and the FAA approves it, we have cell phones that we can do voice communications. Hey, pull out the cell phone, right? Well, let's again assume that that is not the case and we cannot communicate with anybody in any way. The procedures tell us to set transponder code, mode A, code 7600. Again, you in our transponder, we'll normally have some other kind of squawk, and we'll change that to 7600. And that lets the Air Traffic Control Agency know that we cannot communicate. Either we are not hearing and perhaps not transmitting. Of course, you can't always assume that people can't hear you. Even though you can't hear them, you may continue to transmit in the blind. Perhaps the receiving part of your radios, for whatever reason, all of them, aren't working. You can at least tell people and transmit in the blind, just in case somebody can hear what you're saying, to let them know what your intentions are. Let's see, make every effort to reestablish communications. Attempt contact on an alternate frequency listed on the high altitude en route chart. And also attempt contact on the guard frequency, which is 121.5 megahertz in the VHF range. I'm going to go over here because I pulled up a graphic of a chart, excuse me, that has the VOR information, and then the box that gives you the information for the VOR. In this case, I have a graphic for Greensboro. It has on the top of the box some frequencies, 123.65, 122.2, 122.1 receive only, or R. It's interesting that some VORs have also transmit, in addition to the navigational data, also transmit audio. And most of them just do the Morse code identifier of the navigational aid, but some of them will actually transmit voice. And air traffic control, when determining that you're experiencing a lack of radio communication, may flip the switch to transmit to you from a VOR or a VORTAC. So that's something that we need to keep in mind, that we need to go to our navigational radio and pull, turn up the knob for the audio on that, just in case somebody might be trying to communicate with you that way. Okay, messages may be relayed via another station or aircraft. We already talked about that. If unable to communicate because of receiver failure, transmit normally and add the phrase transmitting in the blind. Okay, I mentioned that as well. Transmissions should be repeated once and followed by the estimated time of next transmission. Let's see, we talked about transmitting on nav aids. And should the situation dictate, do not hesitate to exercise emergency authority. And of course that means that I, as a captain, can do whatever I feel is necessary to ensure the safety of my flight. And that's my emergency authority that I can and should exercise when it's appropriate. And now, let's say you're flying along, as Dave from Toronto said, you're flying into Chicago, and about a half an hour before landing, all of the radios have died. Okay, Dave, well, you didn't tell me. What's the weather like? Is it VMC, visual meteorological conditions? Well, if the radio communication failure occurs during VMC, or if VMC conditions are encountered after the failure, the captain should continue the flight under VFR, visual flight rules, and land as soon as practical. There's no requirement to land at an unauthorized or unsuitable airport, or to land only minutes short of the destination. In other words, you can use some logic here. If you're in visual meteorological conditions and you see an airport that's just a few minutes away from the airport you were headed to begin with, the law does not compel you to land at the nearest one. Now, if you're hours and hours away and you're in VMC conditions, that's kind of redundant, isn't it? You're in VMC, well, they're kind of expecting you to go ahead and use that opportunity to land. So that's something to keep in mind there. If being radar, if you're in instrument meteorological conditions, guess what? The shower is starting. I'm going to continue. If it gets too bad, then I'll stop. So you're just going to have to put up with the sound of water cascading over the top of me. Just pretend I'm in a waterfall. Okay, so how appropriate. So if I were in a waterfall, that would be instrument meteorological conditions, wouldn't you say? So if I'm an IMC, I'm in the clouds. Routing is to be via whichever of the following applies. The route last assigned by air traffic control. If you're being radar vectored, by the direct route from the point of radio failure to the fixed route or airway specified in the vector clearance. Your last expected further clearance advised by air traffic control, also abbreviated EFC, and with no assigned or expected further clearance via the route that was specified in the flight plan. Now, there's a reason why we have a flight plan, right? Just in case we lose our communications and we're in IMC, well, we follow the flight plan that we filed and we're cleared to fly. And if you, in a climb, unless previously cleared otherwise, you climb to the minimum en route altitude immediately after crossing the fix where a minimum en route altitude becomes effective. And there's some other rules here. There are basically rules written down here about what altitude to maintain, basically the altitude or flight level that was last assigned, or the altitude specified in an expect further clearance, and then you would do it at the specified time if you were given one, and the minimum altitude for the route segment. Okay, and if you're coming in and you're in instrument meteorological conditions, they're expecting you to proceed to an initial approach fix and fly the instrument approach procedure for one of the runways, and to the best of your ability you would determine what would be the most likely runway assignment, because you might be going into, as you said, Chicago, and there have many, many runways. You probably have some idea. You've probably already planned, especially at 1/2 hour before landing. At this point, we've already briefed what runway we think we're going to be using, and you briefed the entire thing. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to proceed to the initial approach fix, fly the published approach procedure, and if you were it says, when the clearance limit is an initial approach fix, commence the approach as close as possible to the expected further clearance time. If an expected further clearance time has not been received, commence the approach as close as possible to the estimated time of arrival, as calculated from the filed or amended estimated time en route. And then if more than one approach fix is available, select the most appropriate. And finally, let's say we're flying the approach and we're making our blind radio transmissions, telling them what we're doing and what our intentions are. Let's say we break out and we look for the control tower, and we know where the control tower is because we know from our airport diagram, it shows you where the airport control tower is. And why are we looking for the control tower? Well, we're looking for light signals, and then there's a table here in the airway manual that lets us know that we're looking for a steady green light. The tower controllers actually have this very, very strong, powerful beam of light, and they can put different colored lenses on it. And the one we're looking for is the one that is green. And if we see the green light, that means we're cleared to land. If it's flashing green, it says return for landing. So in other words, don't land now, but come back around and return for landing. If you see a steady red light, then you need to give way to another aircraft. Let's see, if it's a flashing red, the airport is unsafe and do not land. That's one you do not want to see. And alternating red and green, that just means use extreme caution. And that's what these light signals mean in flight, and on the ground they mean some other things. So after you've landed, then you're continuing to look at the control tower, if you can see it, and waiting for some lights, colored lights, and whether they're steady or flashing, that means certain things. So again, this information is available to us in our airway manuals in the emergency section for lost communication. Great question, Dave from Toronto, and I hope that this never happens for any of you listening, and especially I hope it never happens to me. Okay. Jake sent some feedback to the website. He said, thank you very much for the great podcast. I really like how the show is interactive with the feedback. I always look forward to the next episode. Well, thanks, Jake. Would like to bring your attention to something that is making the rounds in the media where I currently live in Germany. The buzzword is Fume event. There are 2 articles I would like to reference, and he gave me a one in the Aviation Herald and one on Flight Global, where aircrew members have exhibited symptoms of exposure to something, some kind of a fume or something in the cabin air that caused them to feel either lightheaded or sick. And he says, my question of you is whether you have heard of something similar happening at Acme or in the U.S. in general, and how serious would you estimate a fume event to be? The pilots could always don oxygen masks, as described in the Flight Global article, right? Yes. I mean, if there's any time that I'm sorry, my back just did a weird thing. Anytime that you suspect that there's something wrong with the air that you're breathing in the cockpit, yes, definitely go on oxygen 100%, and then do your troubleshooting after you got the good clean air going into your system. To your knowledge, have non-Airbus aircraft, for instance the Mad Dog, ever had a problem with fume events? Cheers, and thanks for a great podcast. And yes, they have. And usually the fume events have to do with some kind of electrical issue, something that's like a smoke-related issue. I think that there have been times when our auxiliary power units have ended up burning some leaking oil or hydraulic fluid, which kind of puts a certain fume into the cabin, And so we've had fume events, but as far as somebody being affected seriously by these fume events, I don't personally know of any of this happening in Acme, but I'm not saying that it hasn't. And the interesting thing is that there was a documentary filmed in Britain, and let's see, I meant to have that information, but I forgot. I did have it the other day when I was ready to record the show, and I forgot to get it all queued up. Hang on a second. Let me play this little trailer for a movie called Toxic Airline, or Welcome Aboard Toxic Airlines. It's a documentary that was produced a few years back. They sent me a copy of the movie via DVD, and I found this trailer on YouTube. So why don't we take a listen while I go find the information on the DVD. So hang on.
I know what's there. They've never told the truth to the crew or passengers.
As a passenger, I was never made aware that I was breathing unfiltered air.
And nobody is telling them.
The respiratory injuries that I see in passengers and crew are, in my opinion, real.
What does worry me is these passengers who have no idea of what they were exposed to that day could be walking around today with symptoms similar to mine, or even worse, and they'll never know what it was they were exposed to.
Facts which affect their health and their safety, in fact, have been covered up by governments and other people involved.
People are still being contaminated on a daily basis.
Confirms brain damage and cell death.
The federal government and the aviation industry have known about the problem of contaminated bleed air for decades.
They simply don't want to know. If they did, they'd have detectors on the aircraft to find out.
Both pilots during flight are incapacitated for at least 5 minutes.
I think the passengers are in the dark about this. They have no clue.
There's a paper trail a mile long.
Pilots breathing contaminated air is a major problem.
The findings have been of concern and have been published.
Okay, this is take 3. I think I was about 10 minutes into, I don't know, answering some feedback, and realized that the camera was no longer on, and so I'm going to try to pick up from where I think I left off. I was talking about the fume events, the feedback question asked by listener Jake, and was talking about the movie. Actually, was playing the trailer for the movie, and so did a little bit more research about it. The name of the film is Welcome Aboard Toxic Airlines, and I guess it came out in about 2008. I thought it was earlier than that. And the name of the company is Fact Not Fiction Films Limited, and that's factnotfictionfilms.com, all one word. And then you can see all of their fine work that they've been doing, both documentaries and feature films. And this was one of their documentaries, and it tells the real, very real and ongoing story of the air passengers and crews breathing and becoming contaminated with carcinogens and neurotoxins, and the serious health and flight safety consequences which are occurring around the world on commercial aircraft as a consequence of these exposures. And it was produced by and directed by Tristan Lorraine. He is an airline captain that lost his medical certificate back in late 2006 after a dozen medical reports stating that Captain Lorraine's health had been adversely affected from exposure to contaminated air on board jet aircraft. And let's see. There are some contrary opinions to this. Ongoing research by the UK government has not found a link to long-term health problems, and the UK Parliament Select Committee on Science and Technology concludes that the concerns about significant risk to the health of airline passengers and crew are not substantiated. And according to Professor Bagshaw, the former head doctor of British Airways, there have been no peer-reviewed recorded cases of neurological harm in humans following low-level exposure to the organophosphate let's see, tricresyl phosphate or tricresyl phosphate, TCP, which is used as a lubricant in jet engines. So there is that. Still open to question, I guess. I'm not an expert in this. Perhaps maybe one of you listening knows something more about toxic air syndrome and the possibility that burnt substances or burnt organophosphates occasionally do end up getting into the bleed air systems of modern aircraft, with the exception of the Boeing 787, which does not use bleed air for pressurization. So I'll have a link to Fact Not Fiction films and the Welcome Aboard Toxic Airlines film. They've already done. They've also done some others. I was looking through their documentary catalog. In 2012, they produced a documentary entitled "Pilot Fatigue: The Unseen Pressures on Today's Airline Pilots, the Industry's Conflicting Response, and the Tragic Consequences of Denial." Okay. Of course, we now know that there are new laws in effect regarding fatigue, and they actually go into effect as far as the scheduling aspect of the new fatigue rules or anti-fatigue rules. January 4th, I think officially, some airlines like Acme is implementing the policy on January 1st, 2014, so we'll see how that works out. Okay, let's move on now to Brad. Actually, before I do that, let me do a little plug for a new sponsor, Audible.com. For you, the listeners of the Airline Pilot Guy show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. So, many of you enjoy listening to podcasts, especially long-form podcasts like mine. And I've had people write in and say that they listen to me while they're driving a long commute or flying from point A to B on a long airline flight, people working out in the gym, etc. So if you run out of podcasts to listen to, you may want to look into reading books when you can't hold a book to read. So you let somebody read it to you, and that's where Audible.com comes in. Now, if you're interested in aviation, and I'm sure you are, otherwise why would you be listening to my show or watching it? I picked out a book here. It's an Audible version of Patrick Smith's Cockpit Confidential. And let me play a little snippet of, let's see, who is the man reading this? David Drummond reading Patrick Smith's words. Again, this is Cockpit Confidential. Let's take a listen.
The route maps and timetables of Pan Am, Aeroflot, Lufthansa, and British Airways, memorizing the names of the foreign capitals they flew to. Next time you're wedged in economy, flip to the route maps in the back of the in-flight magazine. I could spend hours studying those three-panel foldouts and their crazy nests of city pairs, immersed in a kind of junior pilot porno. I knew the logos and liveries of all the prominent airlines, and many of the non-prominent ones, and could replicate them freehand with a set of colored pencils. Thus I learned geography as thoroughly as I learned aviation. For most pilots, the world beneath those lines of the route map remains a permanent abstraction. Countries and
okay, you get the picture there. There's an example, a little snippet from Cockpit Confidential, one of the many, I believe over 100,000 book titles available on Audible.com. Again, to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy. Again, that's audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy for your free audiobook. All right, so let's continue with some more feedback. Brad and his son Michael write, "Hi Jeff, hope your vacation is a great one. It has been so far, thank you, sir. I just wanted to ask a couple of quick follow-up questions to the ones you answered back in Airline Pilot Guy number 91 for me and my 8-year-old son Michael, who listens to your show every night before he goes to sleep." Forgot to mention his name then, but I remembered this time. So, hey, Michael, if you're listening right now before you go to bed, and if you're still awake, a lot of people, when they listen to my voice, they go right to sleep. So I hope you're still awake. So I just wanted to say hi. Thank you for sending in feedback, Michael, and thank your dad for doing it as well. So let me continue with this question. We asked you back then about if you ever would consider switching to another domestic narrow body, and you mentioned that you were in the top few percent on the pilot group for flying the Mad Dog at your base. I was surprised to hear how much that seniority could drop if you went over to the 7576 or even the 737. Given your many years with Acme, I would have figured you would be very senior in pretty much any aircraft pilot group. Am I right in guessing there must be quite a few pilots just ahead of you in one fairly tight seniority grouping? If so, when these guys hang it up, it looks like the sky's the limit for anything you would want to move to then. And he has some more here, so I'll stop right there and say, yes, you are right. With the hiccup, the recession, and the post 9/11 effect to the airline industry and the bankruptcies a lot of the airlines went through, things did kind of turn into some stagnation, and there were some airlines, including mine, who gave pilots the opportunity to retire early. And the effect of that is that many pilots just about 5 years, 10 years older than I ended up retiring early, and then the rest of the people that kind of filled in those positions in their seniorities, in other words, the top seniorities on all the bigger equipment, are people that are not that much older than I am. And so you're right, there is a very tightly bunched age group in that seniority group that's just ahead of me. So I think in about 3 years or so, things will start moving a little bit more rapidly, 3 to 5 years, and then from that point on, I should be able to have some pretty decent seniority on just about anything I want to fly. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Okay, also with respect to the issue of compressor stalls and power surges in the Gen X engines powering some, or the GE NX engines powering some 787s and 747-8s due to icing in the engines, I'm starting to wonder if the quest to squeeze every last drop of fuel burn efficiency out of a new airframe and power plants, maybe the original equipment manufacturers are pushing the technology and even the manufacturing process envelope a little too much. Maybe it would have been better strategy to have a little less game-changing technology and a little bit more reliability. I suspect the airlines who bought early 787 production slots are thinking that way. What are your thoughts as a pilot who may very well end up flying those? Could you ever trust them, given that they seem to find or keep finding new ways to develop safety and performance issues? I hope so, since I really love the way that airplane looks. Since Michael has just fallen asleep, I think it's time for a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Excellent choice, sir. I love Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing. If in the quest for making these airplanes extremely lightweight and fuel efficient, that perhaps the technologies are being pushed a little too much. I don't know. That's a good question, though. Oh, let's see. Thanks again, Brad and Michael, for your feedback. Josh writes in, heading into the holiday travel season and seeing lots of uncooperative weather thus far, I want to share the link below featuring Canadian Airline WestJet's creative way to thank their customers. What a creative way to say thank you. I hope you and your listeners and watchers enjoy. And then he has a link to a Gawker.com place. And of course, many of this video kind of went viral, in a way. The Canadian carrier WestJet put out a video, and I guess they had 2 flights where they basically had a virtual Santa Claus. People were standing in a certain place and looking into some cameras and then talking to Santa Claus on the other side of the cameras, and Santa Claus was asking them what they wanted for Christmas. And so off they go on their flights, and between the time that they take off and the time they land and arrive at their destination, WestJet employees at, I guess, the destination market go to their many local markets to pick up all of these requests for gifts and toys and that kind of thing that they gave Santa Claus. So it was quite a cute little video, and very good public relations on the part of WestJet. Of course, they're the ones that come up with those really, really funny April Fool's videos every year. And so kudos to WestJet for putting out that and doing that. Made a lot of people happy, including those who watched the video. And if you follow me on Facebook, I did post that video there, and there was a lot of discussion about it there on the Airline Pilot Guy page on Facebook. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it was Josh for mentioning it. Alex Lehman writes, he said, I found this news article, and me being from Canada, I thought it would be interesting for your news section. Air Canada just ordered new 737 MAX aircraft to replace its A319 and A320s. It's interesting to note the change because it is parallel to the order of WestJet of the same type of aircraft. A good business competition is starting in Canada. Air Canada has now 777s and 787s, which should arrive by the beginning of next year. I am attaching the original article so you can share in your show. And I'll put the article in the show notes if you want to read up about the big order of the 737 MAX aircraft by Air Canada. Thanks, Alex, for your feedback. Ray Williams writes, well, he noted this, or mooted this. Is that something? Is that a new thing, mooting? And it has to do with the towing of aircraft to the end of a runway with a tug. We had a little discussion on that on a previous episode about how it seems to me that, or seems to a lot of people, that it would be a good idea to use the tugs to tow the airplane out to some kind of a staging area very close to the end of the runway, fire up the engines and blast off, and it would save a lot of fuel and decrease the carbon footprint of the jets. And so he sent a link to an article. It says, Sir Richard Branson was in Chicago on Monday to announce the return of Virgin Atlantic to the city. He also, this is back in, what year was this? This was a while ago. And he was kind of pitching the idea of using tugs at Chicago Midway as well as London's Heathrow and Gatwick airports. Let's see. This was apparently abandoned because of, amongst other reasons, the stress on the landing gear. And so there's another article here from airliners.net, and the title of the article is Virgin's Green Idea Loses Its Pulling Power. It was sold to airline passengers as a bold green initiative that would save thousands of tons of carbon dioxide from their flights. But Virgin Atlantic has quietly abandoned a plan to tow Boeing 747 jumbo jets to special starting grids at the end of runways after the aircraft manufacturer, Boeing, found that pulling the landing gear would seriously weaken it. Sir Richard Branson, the president of Virgin, has launched a series of green initiatives in the past 2 years in an attempt to claim the mantle of the most environmentally responsible airline. However, an analysis by the Times has found that most are having little, if any, impact on the airline's emissions. So there you have it. It looks like that initiative kind of went right down the tubes, and that was sent in by Ray Williams, my neighbor just north of me in Alpharetta. Thank you, Ray, for sending me a link to that article regarding the towing idea. It just seems that these landing gear systems on our modern aircraft were not designed with the idea that they would endure that kind of a constant stress from being towed. All right, Darren writes, Hi, Captain Jeff. Just like to tell you of an incident that happened here in the UK at Stansted Airport. A Gulfstream G550 jet struck the Essex Airport's instrument landing system as it touched down at 3 a.m. due to low visibility and fog. Inbound flights were unable to land, and flights were diverted to Birmingham and East Midlands airports. Departing flights were unaffected. My question to you is, how does the ILS work? I hope you and your family have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. Great podcast. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Darren. Okay, so how does an ILS work? Well, and I'm just going to talk in very generic terms here, not going to get technical, but we hear about instrument landing systems, ILS approaches, or low low visibility instrument approaches, well, we use a navigational aid called an ILS, and that stands for Instrument Landing System. Basically, the ILS consists of two ground-based navigational aids or antennas that send out an electronic signal, much like a beam of light. You can kind of think of it as. One of the antennas sends out a beam which is very, very narrow at its origin, and then it spreads out a certain number of degrees, and that's called the localizer, and it's aligned with the center line of the runway. In most cases, I know there are some exceptions to this, but in most cases it's lined up exactly with the runway center line, and then it extends out to, well, it depends on the installation, but I think on average about 18 miles, somewhere in that range. And so when we're being vectored in for an approach, we are told at a certain point when we're on a dogleg or an intercept heading to intercepting a localizer, the air traffic controllers will tell us to intercept the localizer, and you are cleared for the ILS approach. The other component of the ILS system is the glide slope, and the glide slope is a beam just like the lateral beam that the localizer antenna puts out, except for this beam is a vertical beam and gives a slope or an electronic aid to ensure that the airplane is coming down on a constant slope, and that's usually about 3 degrees. And the antenna for the localizer is located on the very far end, so if you're landing, the localizer antenna is at the very end of the runway, the far end. The glide slope antenna is right in the touchdown zone, just off to the side, so that if you follow that beam all the way until you hit the runway, you should touch down on the runway approximately 3,000 feet down the runway. Of course, it depends on the installation, but in somewhere, or maybe somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 feet, somewhere in the touchdown zone. And so that's where that antenna is located. If that Gulfstream G550 took out the ILS system, most likely it slid off the end of the runway and somehow impacted the localizer antenna. I'm sure that the glide slope probably still works, but for a fully operating instrument landing system, you have to have both a localizer and a glide slope. Now, we do have certain installations around the country and around the world that just use the lateral aspect of the navigation, the electronic signal, no glide slope information, and in that case we would call it a localizer only approach, or a localizer no glide slope. We also have approaches that use that same kind of technology called an LDA approach. Most don't have glide slope guidance, but some do. For instance, going into one of the approaches into Washington, D.C. is an LDA that has a glide slope, and it terminates at a point basically where you take over visually and follow the river for that last mile or two before you land at the airport, landing south at the National Airport in Washington, D.C. So they have, various types and sorts of installations, but the standard and normal installation of an ILS system is one that involves both a localizer for the lateral guidance and a glide slope for the vertical guidance, and normally aligned right smack dab with the heading of the runway. So sometimes also to enhance these approaches, they'll also install distance measuring equipment, or DME, which means that in addition to having the localizer or lateral information and vertical information, you also have distance information, which is very helpful for positional awareness. And so that's what an ILS system is. And if you're flying a regular ILS, depending on what category ILS you're flying, if it's a category 1 in general, that brings you down to about 2,400 RVR, which is about a half mile. Is that right? 2,400 or 1,800? I guess it can go down all the way to about 1,800 RVR, runway visual range. But it's and about 200 feet or so is where your decision altitude is. So hopefully that'll take you down to below the ceiling, and hopefully the ceiling is a little bit above 200 feet. And you have decent visibility to continue the approach basically visually from there, although you can continue to track the localizer and the glide slope until you get very close to the runway. We have Category 2 approaches, which bring you even lower and have lower visibility requirements. And then, of course, the granddaddy of them all, the Category 3 instrument landing system approach, which, depending on the airplane, the visibility requirement can be pretty darn low. I think all the way down to, I think 500, 600 feet, I believe, is the lowest it goes. I can't recall right off the top of my head, but it's one of those situations where you're really, really foggy. The airport's really foggy. And if your airplane is equipped and the crew is trained to fly a Category 3 instrument approach, and in this case, it's going to be a coupled approach. The airplane is most likely going to have an auto-land system, and I think you have to have an auto-land system for a Category 3 approach. And that brings you all the way down and lands the airplane. So, did I cover your question about the ILS system? Yeah, I think that's it. So I'll have a link to a Wikipedia article about the ILS system, and it'll give you more details. So that's just a basic overview on how an ILS system works. Let's see, Reese Barber sent me some audio feedback, and so let's take a listen.
Captain Jeff, it's Reese here across the pond in England. I've recently been watching a few videos of aircraft that cross the Atlantic, and I've noticed during the cruise when they're actually crossing the Atlantic, they don't seem to follow the FMC. However, they have the plane on heading mode, but they've got the heading selector set to the same course the FMC would be. Can you just explain why they do this? And does it benefit in any way from using the FMC? Is it anything to do with the North and South Pole, the magnetic variation things? Absolutely love the show, and look forward to your next podcast. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Reese, for the question. I thought that Reese had sent me the same question in about, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months ago. I thought I'd answered it, and but if I hadn't, I apologize, Reese, for not answering it. And I did send him back a little bit of a reply, asking him to kind of, if he had some links to some of the videos that he had seen, that would be helpful for me to see exactly what it was that he was looking at. And he wrote back and told me that these were not YouTube videos, but these were simulation videos, I believe. Now I'm forgetting. I should have written this down, and I apologize for not doing so. But anyway, it could be a number of things, Reese. I don't think it's a normal thing for crews not to use the navigation coupling with the autoflight system to the navigation system following these routes. I don't know why you would want to fly using heading mode and not the navigation mode. So I have a couple theories here. I think one may be that, and this is what happens when the airplane that I fly, when we're flying a navigational course, and the airplane changes course, we update the heading bug to kind of match the heading that we're flying to maintain the track. And the reason why we do that is so that if the navigation coupling function fails, that it will revert to heading mode, and we'll have our heading pretty close to where it was tracking before, so we won't go off course right away. You know, you can imagine if it was 20, 30, 50 degrees off that course, and then the navigation mode fails, and then of course it reverts to heading mode. Now most nav systems will revert to heading hold, so it will hold what it has at that point, and it will not actually go to heading select mode. But I think it's just kind of out of a precaution that we end up using the heading bug to keep it tracking and the approximate heading to keep the track. I know I'm not making any sense here, but the other thing that we may be looking at here, or you may have been looking at, is that there is a procedure that many airlines use called strategic lateral offset procedure, and the acronym is SLOP. It's an en route high-altitude procedure used by pilots of turbojet and turboprop aircraft navigating an assigned route along an airway or between published navigational fixes by adjusting their course to parallel the assigned route, either 1 or 2 nautical miles to the right of the airway or course centerline. This kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? Remember, we talked about that first mid-air collision. I think it was the last episode. And they very shortly after this mid-air collision over France or England, they decided, you know what, if you're navigating using a land feature and traveling in a straight line, you should offset to the right. And if the airplane coming the opposite direction does the same thing, now you have some natural slop, some offset to keep the airplanes from hitting each other. So on the North Atlantic region, on the North Atlantic tracks, pilots are expected to fly along the oceanic track center line or 1 or 2 nautical miles to its right, randomly choosing one of these 3 offsets on each entry to oceanic airspace. The aim is to achieve an overall distribution of 1/3 of all flights on each of the 3 possible tracks, thus lowering the overall risk of collision should an aircraft move vertically away from its assigned level. This randomization has the advantage over a planned assignment of offsets to each individual aircraft in that it mitigates the collision hazard for same direction flights should an aircraft be erroneously flown along a track that was not assigned by ATC. SLOP is recommended for use in modern flight management system-based reduced vertical separation minima, RVSM, equipped aircraft operations to mitigate the mid-air collision hazard, which is amplified by the accuracy of modern aircraft navigational technology and onboard flight instruments. That's the odd thing about the navigation systems these days are so accurate that we're all traveling the exact same path, and that leads to some problems. If you happen to have made an error on your altitude, and you're flying the exact same track as every other airplane out there, well, chances are you're more likely to hit another airplane and have a mid-air collision. The other aspect of following these very, very precise paths is that we're now being much more affected by wake turbulence, because in the past, the navigational accuracy of the systems was such that there was always a little slop built into the system, and so nobody was actually precisely following the same path, and so you hardly ever thought about or worried about getting into somebody's wake turbulence. So that's something also that's a factor nowadays with today's modern and very accurate navigational systems. And of course, we are also our vertical spacing is much tighter than it used to be. It used to be above 29,000 feet. You had 2,000 feet of vertical separation. Now it's only 1,000 feet for all the altitudes. So we're flying a lot closer to each other now. In addition to mitigating the en route mid-air collision hazard, SLOP is used to reduce the probability of high altitude wake turbulence encounters. Okay, I just mentioned that. And so there you go. That's SLOP. So it could be that the video that you were looking at, that they were not actually tracking the exact course, but were using, of course, now that I'm thinking about it, even in that case, you wouldn't use heading select even if you were doing a strategic lateral offset procedure, because our navigational systems now are set up so that you can offset left or right of track 1 mile, 1.5 miles, 2 miles, whatever. But again, in this SLOP system over the North Atlantic, you are either going to choose right on the track center line, 1 mile to the right, or 2 miles to the right. You never select anything to the left, because now you're just going to enhance the risk of a collision or a turbulence encounter. So I hope that helped, Reese, with your question. And if anybody else has some other ideas that may help out Reese and what he was seeing when they were activating the heading select mode of the navigation system, please send me feedback. Okay, boy, the animals in my house are just, I thought that that recording in hotel rooms was a problem with controlling noise, but it turns out that it's much more of a challenge here in my own house because there are all kinds of things going on upstairs that I have no control over. Animals tweeting and cats meowing and everything else. It's just a mess. So I apologize for the distractions. Doug Betts wrote, I think this is just awesome. What a proud dad he must be. And he sent me a link to a Daily News article in the New York Daily News where a dad and daughter duo fly a 747. And so, yeah, dad's the captain, and his daughter, a 35-year-old, is his co-pilot. That's pretty cool. So thanks, Doug, for sending that in. Let's see. Finally, we have some more audio feedback, so you can stop listening to me yap. He says, hope all's well. I'm sending in 2 questions. One is L1011 related, and the other has to do with your Bose Aviation headset. Look me up when in Miami. I have a great place to have some beers from all over the world, all ice cold and all delicious. And this is Rick sending me feedback from Miami. So here we go. Let's take a listen to Rick.
Hello, Captain Jeff. My name is Rick. I am a new listener. I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 months now, and I found out about it through a colleague of mine. He told me to listen to it, and I absolutely loved it. And this is the first time I'm leaving feedback. I've been meaning to do it for a while now. A little bit about myself. I am a 777 pilot. I'm based out of Miami. I work for a major international cargo outfit. And apologize for the noise up here. It's we just took off from Santiago down in Chile on our way back up to Miami. We've been flying for about an hour and 20 minutes now, so it got quiet enough for me to hand over the controls and the radio comps over to my trusty colleague here, and he's doing a great job. He's waving hi. In any case, I just wanted to ask you 2 things. Well, the first one had to do with your earlier episodes. I believe it was 31 or 32, because I'm trying to catch up with your early stuff, and then also keep up with new episodes coming out, so that I can, because I like to hear what you have to say about current news and events, and also what other pilots and non-pilots have to say about different things. So going back to my question, it has to do with the L1011. You talked about the direct lift control system and how it worked, and how the aircraft tracked the glide slope based on the spoiler position and not based on the pitch of the aircraft, which I thought was a brilliant way to do it. So I started looking at YouTube videos of passenger views out the window of the spoilers working, tracking that glide slope on the way down, and then also I saw a cockpit landing. I believe it was an ANA, All Nippon Airways aircraft, and you can see the speed brake lever moving forward and aft, as you said, as the direct lift control system works its magic. But what really caught my attention was, after the captain derotated the nose of the aircraft down to the runway, the first officer, who was the pilot not flying, the PM in that case, you can clearly see him grab the yoke, and then he works the trim wheel or trim switch. I don't know what the 1011 has. I probably should have looked that up before I started recording this. Oh well. But you can definitely see him working that trim wheel or trim switch nose down. And that caught my eye because on the 7.6, well, I flew the 7.6 for 7 years, both seats, right and left, and now the 777. On the flight crew training manual, it says not to push the yoke forward after you derotate the aircraft, because what you're doing is you are aerodynamically removing some of that weight off the main wheels, and that makes wheel brake action a bit less effective, which makes a lot of sense. So I was wondering, was that a normal procedure on the 1011 to trim the aircraft nose down after landing, or was that just an airline-specific SOP or standard operating procedure? And since you flew that aircraft for so many years, well, a number of years in any case, I wanted to hear your take on that and what you had to say about that. My second question has to do with your Bose Aviation headsets. Well, as you can tell, and as you know, and all pilots know, it gets noisy up here. And my entire flight career, I have been I've been using the Telex 750s or the 5 Pros. I don't know, the ones that have the little earpiece that you stick in your ear, and you have a boom mic come off that same ear. And then you have that headband, so you only wear it on that one ear, on the right or the left ear, based on what side of the cockpit you're flying, so you can leave the other ear free so you can hear the other guy. So my question was, with active noise reduction, is it easier to hear the other guy, or is the noise reduction so good that you can't hear the other guy? Do you wear your right ear cup offset, or do you just not wear the right ear cup at all, or do you guys use the flight deck intercom system, or just basically what's your take on flying with active noise reduction on an airliner cockpit? I'm looking at getting a pair of Bose A20 headsets, but before I did, I wanted to know what you had to say about the headsets in question. Well, that's it from up here. I'd like to congratulate you on an excellent job. I really, really enjoy your podcast a lot. It's great to have a familiar voice in your headsets or your headphones everywhere I go. You know, on my long layovers or whenever I'm just walking around foreign cities and distant lands, it's great to have a familiar voice with you. And for me, you are it. You're a beer lover, I know that. You've mentioned that a number of times. So am I. So when you are in Miami, I'd like to take you out to this one spot I know, which I know you're going to love. They have beers from all over the world, and they're all ice cold and delicious. So when you're down there, do not hesitate to contact me, call me, look me up. We'll talk shop, drink some beers, and have a good time together. Well, that's it from up here. I'd like to wish you blue skies, happy landings, and may God always bless your family and you. Thanks again for a great job, and we will talk to you very, very soon.
Well, thanks, Rick, for your feedback. Well done, sir, especially for your first time. And good to know that I have some other fellow professional aviators out there. I know I have several of you listening, keeping me straight. I'll answer the, oh no, hope I didn't break my headset control box on my concrete floor, but the first thing you were asking about was the L1011 video that you linked to, and I watched it, and I know exactly what you're talking about there, that first officer over there pushing down or forward on the yoke and hitting the trim forward. And honestly, that must be something that ANA did. That must have been their policy. I don't recall ever doing that in the L1011 or any airplane that I've flown, for that matter. So I don't know why they would end up doing that. Very strange, and it makes sense what you were saying about the 767. You know, trimming nose forward is going to take some of the lift off of the downforce off the main gear and affect your braking effectiveness. I don't know. Now I do know that if you're in a situation where you want to have as much nose wheel steering directional control as possible, then you definitely do want to push forward on the control yoke. I know you're probably going to lose some of the braking effectiveness of the main landing gear, but I think that there are situations where having lateral control, you know, keeping you going straight down the runway is more important. So it's kind of a trade-off, I guess. But that's the only thing I can think of, that perhaps maybe that particular landing, that situation, they had some very high crosswinds, maybe some friction coefficient issues on the runway, and perhaps the captain briefed before they landed that you know, as soon as we land, I want you to push forward on the control yoke and trim the nose forward, so I have good positive steering control on the runway. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, I thought that was kind of odd too. No, that was not anything that we were trained to do at Acme flying the L1011. And then your question about the Bose headset. As you know, I'm using this, about 12, 13-year-old Bose Aviation X or Aviation 10 headset. A few years ago, they came up with their new generation headset, the A20, which you have mentioned looking at. And you know what? I don't think you can go wrong with with really any noise reduction headset, but I can vouch for the Bose headset. It's very, very rugged. As I said, I've had this thing for at least 12 or 13 years. The passive noise reduction is so good on it that honestly, a lot of the time I don't even turn on the active noise reduction. But when you do turn on the active noise reduction, depending on the style and the type you have and how it interfaces with the airplane, mine has the control unit is right here in line with the cords, and you have to put in a couple AA batteries to power the active noise reduction system on it. Your question though was, well, what about communication between crew members? And while activating the active noise reduction system does help, you can, even if you have both cans over both of your ears, I've found, and I think I've seen most people using these types of headsets actually kind of just crack open the ear cover, the ear muff, the can, whatever you want to call it, on one side, so that there's a little bit of a crack there where you can enhance the communication with your fellow crew member. And sometimes I'll even take it all the way off, so I have my whole ear exposed. Occasionally I'll try to, cover up completely my right ear because I'm sitting on the left side, so it would be my right ear that I'd be concerned about so I could communicate with my co-pilot. But it's just, it's not quite as clear, as I said, even with the active noise reduction activated. And so I end up, just moving it a little bit off my ear, just like a little crack, and that's all it takes. At Acme, we don't use the interphone for communications. Now, back in the Air Force, when I flew a very noisy airplane, the C-141 Starlifter, we did actually communicate with each other through the intercom system. And I know that many airlines today, and perhaps a lot of the regional jets do this, I think they have hot mic systems on the interphone, so they don't have to constantly, depress a switch to communicate with each other. It's like always on, so you're just talking normally into your boom microphone and carrying on a conversation over the interphone. I think that's the case. I don't know. I've never flown a regional jet as a pilot, so I don't know if that's the way it works or not. But as far as all the airplanes that I've flown so far at Acme, we did not use the interphone system at all for communications. We used just regular voice communication. We're not sitting that far from each other. And the Mad Dog is a relatively the key word there, quiet cockpit compared to a lot of other airplanes that I've flown. Interestingly, one of the co-pilots I flew with a couple months ago had a brand new headset, and it was made by Sennheiser, another manufacturer of very high quality aviation headsets. And I think he had this one, the HMEC26. It's a lightweight closed and supraoral aviation headset with active noise reduction noise guard, and it also has a feature on it called talk through function. By pressing the button on the headset, a direct communication with the flight crew is possible while wearing the headset. Speech will be conveyed through the earphones by the talk-through microphones. So basically, if he had it activated, so his right cup had the boom microphone attached. Of course, for a captain, it would be the opposite. My headset has the boom mic on the left side, but on his system, the boom mic is on the right, and then on his left ear cup, there was a switch that he pushed the button, and then I think a little light came on, and essentially there's like a little microphone that's just pointing, directly toward the other crew member, and so he can keep both ear cups over each of his ears and still hear good cockpit communications through that little microphone that's sending the ambient noise into the ear cup. So that might be something worth looking into, kind of a neat feature. I always thought that would be kind of a cool idea. As far as I know, Bose has not implemented that feature. So good luck with your shopping, and I think most of these companies will allow you to basically take these things for like a 30-day test drive and try them out, and if you are not satisfied, you can return them. I know it's a big investment. I think that let's see, the Bose A20s are about the same price as these things were when they were brand new, just under $1,000, and maybe a little bit more than $1,000 if you have the one that has the Bluetooth connectivity built in. And I think that's the case as well with the Sennheisers. They may be a couple $100 cheaper, but they're pretty, they're pretty expensive. They're up there. So it may be easier said than done to shell out $800,000 for a headset for a 30-day test drive and then return it. But it may be worth it if it's something you're going to hang on to for quite a while, as I have with my Bose Aviation 10 headset. It may be worth the investment. So good luck with that. Let us know, Rick, what you decided and what your impression is of the headset. And again, great to have you aboard. Great to have another freight dog listening. And it's always nice to have people out there listening and can help me answer folks' questions. All right. So let's get on with another piece of feedback. How am I doing on the time? Another 48 minutes. You know what I'm going to do? Let's see. How are we doing? Getting close to the end. Dun, 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 dun. What's interesting is... Now, how did I do that? Did I answer somebody else's question? Stand by. I know. This is the part where Captain Jeff becomes frazzled and gets a little scatterbrained, etc. Well, I know I just spent a little bit of time answering somebody's question regarding instrument landing systems, and I can't remember now offhand who. Was it Alex? No, you sent me the thing about the 737. It was Darren, and talking about the Gulfstream that took out the ILS system, and you were asking about how that works. And yeah, so I had another piece of feedback. That's why I'm confused regarding the ILS system. It was Ben. Ben this is an interesting story. I was on layover, had just flown into Madison, of all places, and I was walking, just about to walk out the door, heading out to the hotel van, and a guy walks up to me and goes, "Hi, are you Captain Jeff?" And I went, "Yeah, yeah." And he goes, "Well, I'm Ben," and he recognized me, and he had learned about, I think I talked about this on an earlier show, that he had recognized me, and he had been recommended this podcast by Greg Willits and some other people. And so he sent me this feedback, and he said, "First of all, I found this cockpit video from an approach of an Airbus 380 and thought other readers might find it interesting." And it's the one where the Lufthansa crew flies the Airbus 380. It may have been the first time that they took the 380 into San Francisco International. I'm not sure about that. And they had all kinds of GoPro cameras mounted, and you can hear all the audio communications, and you can see all the different angles of the different crew members up front. Very cool video. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And he said, how is the video compared to the atmosphere in your cockpit when you're landing? Is there a similar feel in the cockpit, or is this very different than your approaches and landings? And I'd say it's pretty similar. You know, when you're below 10,000 feet, it's a sterile cockpit environment. Shouldn't be any extraneous communication that doesn't have to do directly with what you're doing in the operation of the airplane. Yeah, it's very, very similar. It's very serious. Everybody's paying attention to instructions given by air traffic control, and call-outs are, standardized, and yeah, it's pretty much the same kind of feel. I didn't notice anything abnormal at all in that particular video of the Lufthansa crew flying the Airbus 380 into San Francisco. Let's see. And a second question, what is the INS? Oh, okay. No, yours was... Okay, yeah, you did ask about the localizer as well. The INS and how does it work? I understand it has something to do with inertia and not using external references, but how does that work? Essentially, the INS, the Inertial Navigation System, is one of the first versions of self-contained navigational systems that don't rely upon ground-based navigational aids. And essentially, again, this is going to be very generalized, but it involves some gyroscopes that are spun up to maintain their gyroscopicity. I don't know what the word is, but they are essentially a very solid platform, and there are accelerometers that are very sensitive that can sense when this gyroscope is moving. So if you anchor this thing to an airplane, it can tell when the airplane is moving, either laterally or forward or backwards, whatever. And so it once you let it know exactly where it is when you first initialize the instrument navigation or the inertial navigation system, it will pretty much know where you are. Now the problem with the early versions of the I'm just going to say INS, the INS systems, is that they tend to precess over time, and that introduces error in the navigational accuracy. And so the early days, to kind of battle that, they would put in 2 and possibly sometimes 3 separate inertial navigation system platforms, and then each of these would be comparing themselves with the other 2, and we as humans would be tracking the navigational accuracy of the inertial platforms to ensure that they were all kind of matching each other. And when one of them didn't agree with 2 of the others, then you would kind of decide, well, that one must be the one that's kind of going off. Chances are that if 2 are pretty close to each other, within a mile or 2 of each other, then those must be the ones that are accurate, and the other one isn't. So you kind of take that one off out of your calculations, and you base your navigation on the 2 remaining platforms. Now, it's not unusual back in those days that after a very long flight, 6, 7, 10-hour flight, that the platform was really about 6 to 10 miles off your course of where you thought you were going. You were. So when you're coasting in, you start using ground-based navigational aids to kind of figure out exactly where you are, because now their accuracy is more accurate than the old INS platforms. So not too long after the implementation of the first INS platforms, companies started making these things that would bring in that aspect of ground-based navigational aids as well. So if you're flying along over the United States and the system is looking and sniffing for navigational signals from VORs and vortex and that kind of thing, DME information, it would start triangulating with various VORs or ground-based navigational aids on the ground, and kind of saying, oh, you know what? My platform is here, but these things are saying we really should be over here, so it would correct itself. So basically self-correcting navigational platforms using the gyroscopic and accelerometer-based navigational system, but receiving inputs from ground-based navigational aids to constantly correct for that precession and that kind of thing. So nowadays, the most accurate systems are ones that use not ground-based navigational aids, but satellites in space. Much, much more accurate. And they also have a component of having their own internal reference system. But again, they're constantly being corrected by the satellite systems. And honestly, I'm not an expert in avionics and navigational systems, so I may be a little bit inaccurate in my description, my last description of how a GPS system works, but maybe it's just exclusively navigation off of orbiting satellites and has nothing to do with an inertial platform. I don't know, but that's basically the way the INS systems worked and work today. And lastly, what is the localizer? And I talked about it on answering that earlier question, a piece of feedback there. So hopefully that covered it for you. And again, as I mentioned before, I'll have a link to a Wikipedia article on the instrument landing system in the show notes. Okay, so I'll tell you what, I think that's enough. This has been painful trying to get this thing recorded over the last week. I think I started on Tuesday or Wednesday, and now it is actually on Saturday. And I'm not sure, as I mentioned at the very beginning, whether or not I'm going to be able to get out another one this week during Christmas this week and my birthday the day after Christmas. I'll see. I'll try to squeeze one out if possible, but if not, I'll have one out the next week where I'll be out flying again and in a hotel room somewhere, and we'll catch up as much as we can. So remember that you can send feedback by heading over to the airlinepilotguy.com website. hit the Contact Me tab, and you'll find a form there. You can send me the feedback, or you can just send me an email, feedback@airlinepilotguide.com. Let's see, I'm on Twitter, Airline Pilot Guy, and also on Facebook, Airline Pilot Guy. And you can find all that information about social media and other stuff on the airlinepilotguy.com website. And also, I'm on Stitcher.com, Stitcher.com/airlinepilot. That's where you can download your app. And remember, Stitcher Smart Radio is the smarter way to listen to radio. So wishing everybody out there a wonderful Christmas holiday. If you do celebrate Christmas, I hope that you have a blessed time with your families, and I look forward to talking with you again on the next episode of the Airline Pilot Guy Show. So remember, wishing you unlimited visibility, clear skies, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.
Good day.